10,000 years ago, at the end of the Ice Age, a mysterious machine from outer space landed on Earth with the purpose of turning humans into mutants. A warrior named Nietzstein gathered all the ancient tribes, and together they sealed the machine deep underground. Later, Nietzstein's descendants founded a cult in Eastern Europe to preserve the knowledge of the machine in legends and the Holy Chronicle book. In 2707, humanity has exhausted its natural resources, and the world is controlled by 4 massive corporations, constantly warring to seize control of the remaining resources. In Europe, the Bauhaus Corporation prepared for a new battle with the Capital Corporation, unaware that they were fighting right above the area where the machine was buried. Commander Steiner of Bauhaus ordered his troops to continue heavy bombardment of the enemy, while Commander Nathan of Capital encouraged his team to be brave and resilient. But morale at Capital was severely declining as they had lost many soldiers, and the chance of victory was becoming slimmer. Sergeant Mitch, with determination, collected the dog tags of every fallen comrade to honor them. At that moment, Bauhaus deployed tanks into the battle, and Capital responded with a heavy artillery barrage. The battle erupted, and the violent explosions revealed the location where the machine was buried, even cracking open the hatch. But no one realized this. Bauhaus retaliated with grenades and toxic gas, quickly spreading into Capital's trenches, killing soldiers who couldn't put on their gas masks in time. Bauhaus soldiers flooded into Capital's trenches, slaughtering everyone in sight. Mitch narrowly escaped death, but Nathan managed to save him at the last moment with a shot that killed the attacker. They didn't give up and quickly counterattacked fiercely. A huge explosion occurred on the roof of the cavern, where the ancient machine was buried. The hatch began to crack open before collapsing entirely. From the deep hole, a strange creature crawled out, charging to take down the nearest soldier. Afterward, it slaughtered nearly the entire army of Capital in the blink of an eye. When Bauhaus forces entered this area, they were stunned by the sight of countless dead bodies. Taking advantage of their confusion, the mutants suddenly attacked. Meanwhile, Nathan and Mitch were trying to find a way to hide and survive. Finding no mutants, they discovered the bodies of their comrades and assumed that Bauhaus was the culprit. Eventually, Nathan encountered Steiner, and the two blamed each other for the current situation, leading to a knife fight. Before they could strike, soldiers from both sides surrounded them. At that moment, the mutants poured out of the deep hole, using their sword-like claws to kill everyone in their path. Realizing the horrific threat, Nathan and Steiner were forced to cooperate, leading both armies to open fire on the creatures. In the battle, Steiner was severely wounded. Fortunately, a rescue plane appeared just in time. Nathan grabbed a machine gun and ran as bait, creating an opportunity for the survivors to retreat safely. Mitch struggled to get Steiner onto the plane, but in horror, he witnessed Nathan run out of ammo, surrounded by the mutants. Soon after, news of the mutants' uprising reached the Nietzstein Order. The leader of the order, Brother Samuel, along with a quiet figure named Severian, hurried to the secret room of the monastery to consult the chronicles about the mutants, hoping to find a way to destroy the machine. According to the book, the mutants bring the injured and the dead back to the machine to turn them into monsters, and no army in the world can defeat them due to their superior strength. However, the book also prophesied that there would be a chosen one, capable of destroying the machine. Samuel quickly organized a meeting with the leaders of the 4 major corporations to discuss the situation. The mutants had already taken over many major cities, and the plan proposed was to evacuate humanity to Mars. But Samuel pointed out that the number of spacecraft was insufficient for everyone. He also believed that the mutants were intelligent enough to pursue them. Samuel suggested a better plan: to send a special forces team into the cave to destroy the machine. However, the leaders of the corporations continued to argue, and could not make a final decision. Meanwhile, under the relentless pressure of the mutants, life in the cities became increasingly dire. Eventually, an evacuation order was issued, but it was impossible to save everyone. As Samuel had predicted, the monsters killed any soldiers attempting to protect the streets. Many families were separated due to the insufficient number of evacuation tickets for everyone. Sometimes explosions intended to kill the mutants accidentally hit the evacuation ships, killing all the civilians on board, along with the monsters crushed by the ships. Meanwhile, a secret leader met with Samuel privately, admitting that he could not fly to Mars due to poor health. However, he was still determined to help. He handed over his ship and evacuation ticket to Samuel, suggesting they use them to attract volunteers by promising that their relatives would be evacuated safely. After Samuel left with the documents in hand, the mutants quickly surrounded and killed the leader. At the same time, Mitch visited Nathan's family to deliver the bad news. Nathan's wife completely broke down, unsure how to protect her daughter since they were not chosen for evacuation. Mitch comforted her as best as he could, but he still felt helpless. That night, Mitch went to the bar, dipping his fallen comrade's dog tags into a glass of whiskey while drunk. At that moment, Samuel appeared, inviting Mitch to join the mission to destroy the machine. At first, Mitch refused, but he changed his mind when Samuel offered him evacuation tickets. The next morning, Nathan's wife was preparing some poison, considering ending it all for herself and her daughter to avoid becoming victims of the monsters. However, Mitch arrived just in time and gave Nathan's wife the evacuation ticket, allowing her and her daughter to escape. Soon after, Samuel gathered a group of brave warriors who had agreed to take on the life or death mission to discuss the plan. Their task was to navigate through a complex underground tunnel system and place a special bomb at the center. The bomb can only be activated with a key inside a machine, but they aren't sure if it is actually there. Samuel believes that the chosen one on the team will solve the problem when the time comes. Then, Steiner leads the group to a holding cell where the military is keeping a monster to guide them on how to kill it. Severian demonstrates excellent skill by killing the monster, while Steiner lists ways to defeat them: phosphorus bombs, guns targeting their weak points, or a sword driven into the right spot. When the monster falls during training, Mitch briefly sees it transform into a human form before it dies. After the training, the team gathers weapons and supplies, preparing to depart. Before they leave, they receive a set of sacred swords. The spaceship shakes violently but eventually takes off safely. During the flight, the team shares stories about the loved ones they gave evacuation tickets to. Suddenly, they spot a civilian ship heading straight toward them. They tried to make contact to ask the ship to change course, but received no response. It turned out that the ship had been taken over by the monsters. Samuel's team immediately opened fire, but the first few shots missed their target. They lost sight of the ship in the clouds, only to suddenly realize their own spaceship had been hit by a large explosion. The spaceship caught fire, forcing the team to run to the escape pod. However, the pod was jammed and couldn't detach. The pilot was seriously injured, but with his remaining strength, he pulled the manual lever, releasing the escape pod. Though the parachute deployed to slow their descent, the pod was too heavy, and the chute tore apart in an instant. The pod began falling at an extremely dangerous speed, and the team argued over when to deploy the reserve parachute. But before they could do anything, the pod slammed into a building and then crashed through it. At that moment, they deployed the reserve parachute, and the pod landed in an open field. Fortunately, everyone was safe except for the captain, who was impaled by a large piece of metal and couldn't be saved. Before he left, Mitch handed him a grenade. As the team moved on, they heard an explosion, marking the captain's sacrifice. Not long after, the group crossed a city occupied by the monsters, moving very carefully. However, Mitch realized that the evacuation was not going smoothly. 2 soldiers were demanding unreasonable amounts of money for civilians to board the ship and were beating anyone who objected. In a fit of rage, Mitch charged through the crowd, confronting the soldiers. When they refused to cooperate, Mitch killed one of them. The remaining soldier, terrified, immediately allowed all civilians to board the ship for free. Afterward, Mitch returned to the team, but was immediately reprimanded by Steiner for his reckless actions, which endangered the safety of the mission. The group continued to move according to the map in the book, and by evening they arrived at an abandoned church. According to the records, beneath the church were secret tunnels leading directly to the machine. They entered the church by using ropes to climb down from the roof. The atmosphere inside was cold and eerie, with ominous religious statues and thousands of scattered skeletons everywhere. Following the instructions in the book, the team crossed the dark catacombs and eventually found the lost city of the ancient people. According to the map, an ancient elevator shaft would lead them down to the tunnel, but to reach it, they had to descend 60 floors. Kim Woo carefully set up a support point at the top of the elevator to protect the team from the old elevator cabin. Then, the group secured the rope and began their dangerous descent. They moved slowly and carefully, and when they reached the distance mentioned in the book, they found no entryway. Samuel decided to double-check the records, but became so engrossed that he lost his footing and fell. Mitch tried to grab him, but the chain broke, causing Samuel to fall freely. Fortunately, the fall wasn't too deep, and Samuel wasn't injured. However, below, countless monsters were waiting. Mitch jumped down, fired continuously to protect Samuel, and then closed the elevator door. Hearing the noise, Steiner threw a grenade, but Severian quickly caught it and threw it into the pit below to avoid injuring Samuel. The explosion attracted more monsters, and when the whole team joined Samuel, a fierce battle broke out. They fought valiantly, but were overwhelmed by the sheer number of monsters. The team was forced to retreat, but the monsters immediately pursued them and cornered them. Kim Woo, furious, fired relentlessly from the machine gun, taking down many monsters until the ammunition ran out. Kim Woo set fire and severed the cables, causing the cabin to begin falling. While the cabin fell, Kim Woo fought with a sword before switching to a gun. He used the arm blade of one monster to kill it. At the bottom, the team prepared to jump down and fight with swords, but the cabin suddenly crashed hard into the monsters, causing a massive explosion. Despite this, not all of the monsters were destroyed. As the team prepared to continue fighting, Kim Woo's hand reached out from the rubble and triggered a grenade, wiping out the remaining monsters while sacrificing himself. The group took a moment to honor Kim Woo's memory before resting and continuing their journey. Samuel once again checked the book, which frustrated Mitch, who couldn't understand what was so special about it. Samuel advised Mitch to trust him, then poured water onto the ground. The water flowed through 2 small holes, revealing the entrance to a secret tunnel. The group quickly moved through the passage to another room, where they carefully navigated along the edge of the wall. Below, the monsters were dragging the wounded toward the machine. Mitch was stunned when he realized Nathan was among them. Steiner, knowing Mitch would want to save his friend, ordered him to stay behind, but Mitch didn't listen and left on his own. Steiner aimed to stop Mitch with a shot, but couldn't bring himself to do it, so he continued leading the group forward. Meanwhile, Mitch climbed down, stealthily shooting a stalactite, which fell and hit the monster, dragging Nathan, who was now exhausted and heavily bleeding. Mitch finally saved Nathan and brought him to safety. Nathan asked about his family, and Mitch reassured him that they were safe on Mars. Knowing his wife and child were protected, Nathan could peacefully let go. He asked Mitch to leave him behind and continue the mission. Realizing his friend was in excruciating pain, Mitch agonizingly decided to help Nathan find peace. Meanwhile, the rest of the team reached a narrow bridge they had to cross carefully to avoid alerting the monsters below. Suddenly, a small stone fell. Steiner lost his footing and fell, barely managing to cling to the edge of the bridge. Steiner was carrying the bomb, so Severian immediately dangled himself by the edge of the bridge, carefully retrieving the bomb from Steiner before he fell to the bottom. Steiner was attacked by monsters he fought with all his might to hold them off. Samuel believed they should leave him behind and continue with the mission, but the others firmly disagreed and jumped in to help. A fierce battle erupted as the team fought the monsters with all of their strength, but the monsters were too numerous, and facing such a large army was impossible. A massive explosion left every member of the group severely injured, and sadly, Samuel perished. The monsters then dragged all the corpses toward the machine. Just a few minutes later, Mitch arrived and painfully discovered Jesus' badge. Suddenly, he was attacked by a monster, but quickly took it down thanks to a warning from Severian. The nun had escaped, and this was the first time she spoke after many years. Mitch picked up the broken pieces of the book and asked her to read it to know where to go next. However, Severian could not read. She only trusted the book. Furious, Mitch decided to go to the center of the cave, disregarding everything, and took matters into his own hands. The two of them continued forward until they found the monster's nest. Immediately, they set a bomb and watched as their teammates were dragged toward the machine. The bomb blocked the entrance and killed a few monsters, creating an opportunity for Mitch to run and rescue Valerie and Steiner. Entering the center pit of the cave, Mitch discovered a strange mechanism where people were attached. It seemed that this mechanism would turn them into monsters after a complete rotation. Severian and Valerie tied a rope around themselves and descended deep into the heart of the machine, while Mitch and Steiner held the rope from above. Soon after, the monsters began to break through the pile of rocks blocking the entrance. Steiner left Mitch to handle the rope alone and charged into battle with the monsters. However, the weight was too heavy for Mitch to hold onto the rope, and he was pulled toward the edge of the pit. Steiner said his goodbyes, activated a grenade, and wiped out all the monsters. The explosion caused Mitch to fall into the pit, followed by the two women. Mitch, however, fell into the mechanism of the machine, causing it to activate and trap him. Mitch was exposed to radiation, and a mechanical arm inserted chips into his body. The final chip was inserted into Mitch's head, but he constantly jerked his neck to avoid it. The mechanical arm slid, and instead of inserting the chip, it cut the ropes, freeing Mitch to grab his gun and destroy the mechanical arm. Afterward, Mitch joined the women and used a knife to remove the chips from his body. His face was still slightly distorted, but he hadn't fully turned into a monster. The group finally reached the center of the machine, and while Mitch prepared the bomb, Severian and Valerie fought off the monsters from both sides. Mitch didn't fully understand the device and couldn't figure out which hole to place the detonator in, so he had to fumble through the few pages of the book he had. Severian continued fighting a few more monsters, but she froze when she saw Samuel, now mutated, approaching her. However, Severian reacted when Samuel attacked her, and she was forced to fight him. On the other side, Valerie killed another monster, but in the process she fell, and the rotating mechanism cut her body in two. Mitch took Valerie's place and continued fighting the remaining monsters, urging Severian to kill Samuel. But she couldn't do it to her precious teacher, and Samuel stabbed her before pushing her outside. Then Samuel and Mitch began to fight hand to hand. They exchanged a few punches before Mitch knocked Samuel to the ground and began to punch him with his team's badge. Samuel shoved Mitch away, and Mitch fell near a page from the book and a sword. Mitch realized the holy sword was the key. He immediately used it to stab Samuel and inserted it into the machine. At the same time, a hatch door opened at the ceiling, and the structure began to shake. Samuel told Mitch to take a leap of faith. After a moment of hesitation, Mitch jumped down and fell into an underground river. When he surfaced, he saw the machine take off, flying into space and ultimately leaving Earth forever. We have just finished the summary of the movie Mutant Chronicles. Don't forget to subscribe to follow the next videos. Thank you for watching.